hey, man, we got your back. You get the deal. Good morning, Brad. How are you? You got a chance last week, a couple of weeks ago, to join us on the air. Our good friend Kevin Lindsey is joining us for the Matters of Maintenance, or as I like to say, Maintenance Matters. Of course, one of Dave's favorite alliterative segments here. If you guys don't know Kevin, I just want to know what's wrong with you. No, I really do. I'm just curious. You can call us at 615-292-6366, and you can. This is a trust circle. You can just call us and tell us everything that's wrong with you and why you don't know who Kevin Lindsey is. I do, by the way. He's the manager of technical service at TravelCenters of America. Basically, he's the guy that says, this is what's going wrong, and here's how to fix it. Now somebody else go do it. Hey, Kevin, what's going on, man?
I like that analogy. I like that.
Well, that's the truth, though. It's like I thought about this for a long time. Because Dave was here yesterday and he kind of shuffled off. Dave was here and he shuffled off, and he's like, well, I'm going to go now. I said, yeah, well, you've earned that, dude. I mean, you busted your ass your whole life, and now here's your moment to be like, yeah, I've got some opinions and some thoughts. Here they are. Now I'm going to leave. Talk amongst yourselves. What's going on, man? How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. How about you guys?
I'm here with Brad, which is always good. The Fastport Studios are shaping up. We're getting more stuff hung. We actually just hung a couple of days ago. Was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday. We hung a what is it, Brad? I always forget. It's a cigar box guitar. Yeah. We hung a cigar box guitar, and
I have one of those.
Can you play it?
Of course.
All right. Well, here's the deal.
Why would I have something I couldn't play?
Oh, you'd be amazed. You'd be amazed. You'd be amazed. There's a lot of guys that have a lot of toys in their garage, and it's like, you're
not very good, but I play it.
Yeah,
it's all practice. So.
Commitment to excellence, right there. Well, then I'm telling you, man, on July 23rd, you should make your way down here to our studios, because we're going to have a big old jam session. We're going to have food and drink and some special guests. We're going to cut the ribbon on this studio. You should maybe come on down here and show us your chops, or lack thereof.
Dave asked me about that. Unfortunately, I will be stuck in Lodi again.
No
pun intended.
I guess I'll just be like looking out my back door, seeing if you show up at some point. Yeah, you like that?
Right.
Come around the bend, man.
No, that's all good. Good stuff.
Well, look, that ain't me. I ain't no senator's son. I'm just Jimmy Mack here with Kevin Lindsey on Maintenance Matters. Okay, so what is today's conversation? What are we talking about today, Kevin Lindsey? Let's unpack this, and people can call in if they have thoughts and farts and all the other kind of groovy stuff.
Well, I thought it'd be a good time to talk about some cooling system maintenance. Just kind of roughly, different things to look for, especially, with the heat waves, going on, all the heat in the Southwest, Southeast, Midwest. It's everywhere, I think, isn't it? So.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this, though. Dre was driving here this morning, and I called him just check in, because he's coming in from Ocean Springs, and he literally answers the phone, and he goes, I got to let you go right now. I'm like, why? He said, it is literally raining like you wouldn't believe, and nobody can see and nobody can drive. So I said, okay, I get off the phone immediately. A minute later, the phone rings, and he says, it just stopped. And
just stop.
Which is the typical thing in the Southeast, as you know. If you don't like the weather, give it a mile marker.
That's right.
I wanted to open this up by asking you, since we're having all these heat waves over the place, if the approach is, if somebody's driving across the country, there's a consistency to that. But if people drive in regions, they need to have different approaches for how they even handle their cooling systems. Is that fair?
It is, for sure, because, just depending on where you're at, the best thing, quite honestly, is consistency, kind of like you said, but consistency in the way you maintain the cooling system, because regardless of whether it's, dead of winter in Minnesota or middle of summer in Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, or in Arizona, with it over 100 degrees. If it's maintained properly all the time, then it really don't matter. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, that's the irony, and I guess. And by the way, it's a perfect answer, because what the second part of the question is how do different. Okay, all right. I gotta stop this for a second because I'm actually running ahead of myself, which is typical of me, which is why my coolant systems always fail. I am curious when things do go wrong, and things go wrong often because people simply don't do what I call the preventative maintenance, what you call the preventative maintenance. In different regions, what are the risks? What are the kind of things that can happen that are different from place to place? Is I guess the follow-up question, and then we're going to go back and you're going to explain how a coolant system works.
Well, really, what it is, if you maintain kind of that consistency, according to the manufacturer specifications, whatever, but most cooling systems really require almost like a 50-50 mixture, of good clean water and coolant, and which a lot of it nowadays is already pre-mixed. So I guess the biggest thing is that's one of those things. If you don't ever see a leak, don't recognize that there could be something going on with that cooling system because, hey, I haven't seen a leak. It's not, my coolant level's not dropping, which, just with normal use with no leak, you will lose some to evaporation, different things going on, just because of the way things flow around and everything over time. So probably the biggest killer is when people just add water to that system because all you did there is dilute it. And it's a good balance you have to keep. Even though we call it freeze protection, it's also anti-boil protection because that's really what coolant does. When it's mixed with the water, runs through the system, and there's lots of additives in it that not only help with a freeze point or a boiling point, but for lubrication of the components that it comes in contact with. And that's where, so an over concentrated, if you just add, straight concentrated coolant to a system, what can happen is the seals and stuff in the water pump and different components in that cooling system, even temp sensors, it can cause erosion, it can cause leaks, and maybe not even always internally, but it could allow that the water pump don't pump as much. It's kind of weird because really what happens is it goes back to almost a viscosity thing, right, with the oil, because but it's kind of like that thing with is it mayonnaise or is it honey? It's more concentrate. I really hate to go back to that, but it was a great analogy. But so how easily does things move through it, and that's the veins on the water pump. It can actually cause more stress on it, which is going to cause things to operate a little bit harder. Not only affecting fuel mileage, emissions, things like that, but affecting the longevity, the proposed life of those components in the system, right?
We can't.
So a lot of little things we don't think about when it comes to that stuff.
It's funny, Kevin. People. The older you get, the more you realize that we never fail to design things that are not us. I know that sounds like what am I talking about? But everything that we ever invent is a personification of us. It is merely our own lived experience created into machine form. And just like we require the idea that, okay, I guess the best example in regards to kind of helping people understand this, and although we've moved past Gatorade is a great example because it's a thing where, yes, we need to be hydrated, but it's not just a matter of hydration. We need certain kind of minerals. We need certain kind of additives that have to be put inside those drinks. Now, we've gotten much more sophisticated about the packets we pour into water now and all that kind of stuff. But it really is figuring out what kind of products really work the best to kind of restore not only our lost water, but to restore the lost additives and the lost vitamins in our own system. And so we tend to design things that require the same sort of, although I will say, ironically, in the case of truckers, they often care more about their trucks than they do about their own bodies. But, so much of this is applying your own lessons about how you want to treat yourself in a healthy fashion is the way you want to kind of approach this. And I guess it sets up and I keep on delaying the question, but it sets up the other thing is to what are you really looking for in regards to making sure you have mayonnaise and not honey? What do you want in a good additive? What do you want to be able to pour in there? What do you find is the best mix? And yes, you can do a shameless plug for something that you use.
Well, I mean, me personally, since I don't drive, a big truck, with a diesel engine and everything, I really don't do much with my coolant other than change it out, on occasion. Most today's coolants, most trucks from the factory have what we call packages in them for extended life coolants or ELCs and stuff like that. So, which I highly recommend on any heavy duty diesel. Now, a lot of those have a lot of the different components in it. Years ago in our industry, the big thing was you had to put the proper SCA packages, to keep the liners from pitting and stuff, because in the diesel engine, those liners are the critical life component, and anytime that the coolant flows by them, if it's water, because of the heat generated, from the compression and everything inside the combustion chamber, all of that heat that's generated, immediately is dispersed to those liners. So if the mixture wasn't right, as the coolant flows around those liners, if that mixture wasn't right, it could cause little bubbles, and these little bubbles could, because the temperature, such a high temperature increase such a short period of time, it would cause a little divoting on those liners, and over time it would just eat it, and then finally there's a pinhole in it. So, now you're getting compression into the coolant, which puts too much pressure in the cooling system and all this stuff, and you end up with all these different issues. So, we still see that, but because the metallurgy of the liners, manufacturers have made these things, the manufacturing tolerances are so much better nowadays than they used to be. We don't see as much of that anymore, but it's still there, because if you don't maintain that cooling system, keep those additive packages in there properly, especially in older equipment, it's going to shorten the life of that.
All right. Strange question then. So it almost seems like the more we improve these things, the harder it gets to spot when problems are coming. The old joke about, you know what I'm saying? I'm not being a jerk here, but the idea that it's like if in fact you're not wearing it down as much, if in fact it is actually able to hold better, we often let things then go on way too long because the machinery is built better. And by the time we get to it, the old joke about if you're thirsty, it's too late. If you're tired, it's too late is one of my favorite comments, that if you are literally falling asleep behind the wheel, you should have been asleep an hour and a half ago. If you are actually walking and you are dying of thirst, you should have been drinking an hour and a half ago. And I'm wondering if, ironically, our improvements in how we have made this machinery has in fact made it more difficult for us to see the little telltale signs. Although, if you've got pinholes, it's probably too late at that point too. You should have kept up with it,
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's no way to remake the metal around those liners and things like that. So once that's eroded, to a certain point, you're pretty much done. New components are required, all that good stuff. And nobody wants that, because those end up becoming, really high dollar repair bills, and, and possibly even, new engines because of that. So, no one wants that. And that's why it is real critical to, but for maintaining systems, I'll be honest with you, if I'm an owner operator in today's vehicles, I'm probably going to spend that little extra money for some really good, coolant test strips, if nothing else. Because you can buy them at any truck stop, including ours, parts houses, different places like that. But these test strips, just to check, periodically, weekly, something like that, it can give you some good indications of what's going on. Any system that has a mixture of water in it, such as a cooling system on trucks or whatever, there's a key thing that a lot of people, and even manufacturers, coolant manufacturers, don't talk a lot about. But that's keeping the alkalinity at the right levels. Because if it becomes too acidic, usually what that means is there's actually compression getting into it, which is into the system from somewhere. And, that's not always from the cylinder liners and things like that, because there's different components nowadays, that open and close, based on temperature, based on operating conditions, different things like that. We got DEF tanks nowadays on the trucks, and by EPA regulations, they have to be thawed in the winter. And I know we're talking about in the middle of the summer, but in the winter, DEF freezes at 12 degrees, so they have to be thawed by the engine cooling system, by regulation. So there's a coolant, circuit that flows through the DEF tanks. Does it flow through there during the summer? Well, it shouldn't, because they use cutoff valves that are electronically controlled and things like that. But that don't mean there's not coolant sitting there. And it don't mean that an electronic valve can't go bad and cause it to circulate, which actually is going to increase the temperature of the DEF in the tank, because now you've got, 220-degree coolant running through there. Because these engines, since EPA 07 engines, all run a lot hotter than they used to, based on emissions, levels and things like that. So the higher temperatures, in our cooling systems on the trucks nowadays, actually, in places where that coolant circulates, that we use it, for auxiliary reasons, such as the DEF tank heater, the heater in the cab of the truck. A lot of those have automatic shut-off valves nowadays. And actually some of them don't, because most systems use what I always refer to as a blend air system on the AC side, meaning that it just shuts the airflow off across the heater core. But as the engine's running and the cooling system's, churning, that coolant flow is still running through that heater core. It's just there's no air going across it. It goes across the evaporator first and out the vents, and it's blocked off from going across the heater core. So there's still heat that builds up in there, and there's still coolant circulation there. So, even you may see small leaks in the floorboard of the truck, and think, well, that's just my AC work, and I probably need to check that drain for the AC or something like that. Well, if it happens to be coolant, it's very possible you got a heater core leaking. And one of the biggest things I've ever seen with heater cores, even EGR coolers, anything on that engine on that truck that's using that cooling system flow through it, because of the extreme temperatures, and not necessarily pressures in cooling systems, because most cooling systems on big trucks still use 10 to 15 pound pressure caps, in the system somewhere. But at different points in that system, you could actually have pressure spikes. And it's just because of the amount of flow that's required through these systems nowadays. Most cooling systems on diesel engines, the amount of flow in that cooling system is the critical part, because a lot of times, most cooling systems have anywhere between 10 to 12 gallons of coolant in that system, just depending on different things. But stop and think about this. At road speed, when your RPMs are up, say, and which nowadays is even lower, but let's say at 1,500 RPMs, just for instance, you may be actually circulating that entire amount of coolant every minute. So that's a lot of flow, going through different little ports, around liners, through EGR coolers, through heater cores. It's a lot of coolant flow. So it's a higher volume of coolant flow, and that's to help keep everything cool. because we are running the temperatures a little bit higher. We're burning a little bit hotter to meet emissions, things like that, So a lot of little things we don't think about that's going on with these, but, it's out there. And what can happen is that amount of flow moves through all these. You got so many dissimilar metals within a cooling system because you got iron, you've got aluminum, you got soldered, joints, you've got, different brass and all of these different metals, and you got plastics, right? So as everything flows through there, all of those materials, as temperatures increase and decrease and things, they're going to expand and contract at different times, at different temperatures. So, which actually starts affecting the way things flow through them. So there's a lot of little bitty things going on in there that we kind of take for granted on these a lot of times.
Well, I'm laughing about this because, and by the way, masterful, absolutely masterful in regards to being able to follow you and kind of lay out that. But it dawns on me, I kept saying to myself as you kept talking, I said, how much of this is never going to be a problem provided you do the preventative maintenance you're supposed to do? That everything you're talking about, aside from what I call something popping up from the road and severing something, puncturing something, genuinely unforeseen instances where, there is an obstacle of some kind that ends up damaging, underneath where, it just shouldn't have happened. And it's unforeseeable. So much of what you're talking about, even with the complexity of the system, if in fact you're going to the doctor, getting your checkup, and eating a balanced diet, I mean, you get what I'm saying here. All of this kind of stuff is, but thank you for that, by the way, because it's important. We have a lot of people out there who've been doing this forever, and they understand the ins and outs of their system. There's a lot of people now, you've seen them, who are going to work for companies who all they know is they know how to drive it, hopefully. They know how to pass a test, hopefully, but they don't know if you lifted up that hood, if you went underneath and said, start identifying stuff, they couldn't do it. So much, if you want to be that kind of truck driver, and there are lots of them out there, then it really behooves you to be like, hey, I need to get the truck checked. I need to get my fluids changed.
Yeah.
I need to really get on top of this. Because everything you've said, if any of that stuff goes wrong, that's a big price tag as well, correct?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, especially with that cooling system, because a lot of the drivers nowadays, kind of assume that engines will shut down for low coolant levels because for high coolant temperatures. But there's a lot of those are customer optional parameters nowadays as far as shutting the engine down. Now, chances are, most engine OEMs, on a new truck from the factory are going to have their own things in place to not let that engine fail, but at the same time, that's not, that's, they're in the business of manufacturing pieces and parts and selling these engines, but they don't want to have to pay for that under warranty. So from a business standpoint, if you stop and think about that, they'll probably make more money selling parts, but they still don't want that reputation. That they don't want that failure. They want to be the best product out there at the same time, right? So you got to find, these manufacturers find that balance, and that's where we start seeing, you've got a 3-year, 300,000-mile warranty on this part of the system, but you only get 1 year, 100,000 on this, and, different things like that, and that's why we see that stuff. And not to get too far off in the weeds here, but that's that's what they're in business for. So you do, but we still have to rely on those manufacturers. This is what they recommend. But you got to remember they're looking at every one of those engines in every application that's out there that they sell. What do I do? I run in this area. I run 200-mile trips, 7 times a week, something. This is what I do. This works best for me in this engine. So you kind of have to find your own sweet spot, right? So.
Yeah, and I tell you this is from my own personal experience, just on four wheels. I have now gotten in the habit. Literally on June the 1st, I go over there and I get all that stuff looked at because it became almost kind of like a yearly tradition of, wait, why is my AC not working on the first day of summer? I don't. And by the way, guys, it's called air conditioning, not cool conditioning. I want to make this really clear. I mean, you're conditioning the air to do certain things at certain times. Drives me crazy, by the way. And if you ever really want to go now to talk to people about what it is their actual house air conditioners do, you'd be amazed at what people think they do. I need you to put my heater on at 78. Your heater doesn't blow 78; it blows 90. People don't understand. The temperatures aren't being the temperature isn't being controlled. It comes off the coils at one temperature and then gets regulated from that point on. That's a thing that a lot of people forget as well. On kind of a fun note, I wanted to kind of follow this up in regards to people who are going to be heading out for the 4th of July week. And by the way, I now know why you took your vacation early, because AAA is predicting a monstrously awful situation in regards to there's going to be like a gazillion people out there on the highways and byways. In regards to personal conveyance, and I mean in cars and all that, Kevin, you recommend before people go on vacation they actually get all this stuff looked at before they ever step into a car, even if they had a tune-up 6 months ago. People need to sit down and take care of that kind of stuff, right? It never hurts to go in there and spend a little bit of money, right?
No, absolutely not. You know, I mean, it's one of those things, you know, having someone, you know, that knows what they're doing, and trust me, I understand that people don't like to pay other people to look at things that, well, you know, they're just telling me I need this because they're trying to make money. Well, you know, we're all trying to make money, right? That's when we stop and think about it. And you know, we're all trying to save money. We're all trying not to spend, you know, the money that we work hard for. But the reality of it is, you know, the old, I think it was it a Fram, I think, commercial years ago. You can pay me now, you can pay me later.
Oh,
you know, yeah. Regardless, paying later always costs more.
Well, I'll tell you this, too. I tell people
it's unfortunate, but it is the truth, right? It really does.
Well, the other thing about it is, too, I tell people if you don't want to get that upsell that people often get when they go to oil change places and all that stuff, I say, go find a guy. Actually, make a commitment to actually maintaining your vehicle, whether it is the truck you drive for a living or whether it is the car that you drive when you're home, because then they depend upon your business and they get a whole lot more honest about what you need when they know you're coming in on a regular basis. And it's like I tell people, if you're going to pay for a haircut on a regular basis, pay for the maintenance on a regular basis. It's why maintenance matters. Hey, you see what I did there? That's pretty good, huh?
Hey, that was pretty good.
Thank you.
It's almost like you do this for a living.
I know, kind of, sort of. I mean, after that magisterial kind of overview of coolant systems, I think you might do this for a living too. Oh, wait, look, I'm looking at the bio here, and it turns out that you're the manager of technical service at TravelCenters of America. Guys, go to ta-petro.com, find out more about that wonderful company. Big thanks to you, Kevin. Happy 4th of July, my friend. It's always a great chance to get to talk to you.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. I appreciate it.